Ready, set, go!
This is CheckpointXP Daily, your daily dose of esports and video game discussion. A complete look at all things esports and gaming. A production of Beasley Esports XP. Here are your hosts, Nate Bender, Robbie Landis, Norris Howard, and Joe Sloan.
Checkpoint reached.
Hey, welcome to Checkpoint XP Daily for Thursday, July 25th, 2019. Your home for esports and gaming. Want to thank everyone listening on WWKB 1520 in Buffalo and ESPN Radio 97.7, 100.1, and 1200 AM in Syracuse, New York. Coming up today on Checkpoint XP Daily, could Disney be making a buy into the video game world? Plus, we've got to talk about this new GTA Online Casino. This is just an amazing piece of satire.
Yeah.
Those conversations are ahead here today on Checkpoint XP Daily. But we start today with an interview with Tommy Tallarico. Joe got to go out to Video Games Live where he got to meet Tommy Tallarico.
Hey guys, this is Joe with Checkpoint XP. I am at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra at the Max M. Fisher Theater, and I am joined now by a legend of the video game industry. You may know him as the composer of Earthworm Jim. You may know him as the creator of Video Games Live. You may know him as one of the first people to ever release a video game album. Tommy Tallarico is our guest here. Tommy, welcome to Checkpoint XP.
Where is he? I don't see him. Oh, that's me. That's me. Yes. Wow, I sound busy.
Yes. The heck? That's where I wanted to start is you have had your hand in just about every facet of the gaming industry, whether it be Earthworm Jim, whether it be G4, whether it be a list, any number of things. Where do you find the time, first of all?
Well, you know what it is I love what I do. I'm actually passionate about video games, and it's consumed my entire life, both as a child and growing up in the 70s and 80s, and into my adulthood and my career. And of course, yeah, you mentioned, video game composer and sound designer on games like Earthworm Jim and Tony Hawk and Metroid and all these great, I was part of the original Guitar Hero, worked on that, some stuff. All these things, and then of course you mentioned G4. Even before G4, though, we had started a TV show called The Electric Playground. In 1994, we started that, and it was the longest-running video game TV show ever. And I was on that for 12 years, and we broke that off and did another show called Reviews on the Run, or in the U.S. it was known as Judgment Day. So I was doing two weekly half-hour TV shows that we would film up in Vancouver. So I'd spend 1 week every month, and I did that for 12 years, creating shows. Plus, I was working on anywhere from 20 to 30 video game soundtracks and sound design a year. And then I started a nonprofit organization called the Game Audio Network Guild in 2002, which now has over 2,500 members worldwide in over 50 countries. And then that same year is when I started Video Games Live in 2002. And then when I started touring the show, when the show really kind of exploded, I had to stop doing the TV show in 2007, about then. So I was at one time doing all those things. I have four major companies and four major things all going on at once. But now I of course, I'm the CEO and president of Intellivision. So if all that other stuff wasn't enough, it's like, yeah, I want to do a video game console now. And so that's what we're doing. We're coming out with the Intellivision Amico next year, 10/10/2020. I've been working on it for a couple of years. I have an amazing team. We have over 300 people, working on it and bringing it to the market. And again, it's all about passion.
Well, and I'd actually like to take a moment on the Intellivision Amico. Talk about an announcement no one was expecting to hear last year when that announcement came to life. How did that come about? Were you an Intellivision fan growing up? How did that all come about?
Yeah, so my system growing up was Intellivision. Back in the late 70s, you either had an Intellivision or an Atari if you were into video games, right? And 80% of the market was Atari, right? Atari was the winner of, they came out in 1977 and they were a little less. Intellivision was the better machine, technically, but it was more expensive, and it came out in 1979, so a couple years later. And so, but yeah, we held at 20% of the video game market by the early 80s. We were doing $500 million a year. Back then, that's the equivalent of $1.4 billion this year. We had 1,800 employees worldwide. And it's crazy. We even still have 4 people at the company who started in 1980. So, yeah. So this isn't like some company that's been traded a bunch of gazillion times. There's actually still the heart and soul of the company is still there. And they're still pissed at Atari. They still don't. It's like, but still rivals. But no, so and that was my system growing up. That was when I think of video games when I was a kid, that's what I think about, playing with my mom and my dad and my younger brother. And that's really the whole life force behind Amico, behind the new system, is that we're all about simple, affordable, family entertainment. That's what that spells out safe. Yeah. And so there's no violent games on the machine at all. There's no, bad language or blood or any of that. It's all family friendly content. That doesn't mean it's a bunch of kiddie stuff. Right. Not at all. I mean, 90% of most video games are not rated M, mature, It's just as you always hear about those ones. But
Think about the Wii, which was one of the most successful systems of all time, and it would fall into much that same category.
Exactly. The Wii was the third biggest home console of all time, 102 million units sold, generated $50 billion in revenue. But the reality is that about over 35% of the people who purchased a Wii for $249 never bought another game for it, because Nintendo's whole thing was, they weren't trying to create games for my mom. Like, my mom bought a Wii so she could play bowling, right? And so a lot of people were like, hey, do a bowling game, do shuffleboard, do horseshoes, do all card games and all these casual games, because this is before mobile, right? And Nintendo, they do what they do. They're a great company. They're a $40 billion a year company because they're smart and they know how to cater to their audience. Their audience, though, are, millennials who grew up on Pokemon, Mario, and Zelda. So when the Wii came out, they went right back to their wheelhouse. They did Pikmin and Metroid Prime, a game I worked on with Miyamoto for 5 years, Smash Brothers and Zelda and Pokemon and Mario and this and that. So and then of course mobile and the Wii was 13 years ago. Oh, yeah. Amazing. It doesn't seem like that long ago. It's crazy. And then when kind of mobile kind of took over. Mobile dominates the video game industry. Video game industry last year did $140 billion. 55% of that was mobile games. 25% of it was home consoles, and about 20% of it is PC and Mac. And so those are the three factions, right? And so mobile is doubling and almost tripling what those other two categories are doing. That says a lot, right? There's 200 million hardcore gamers in the world, but 3 billion people who play casual games every day. And so that's what we're doing. What we're doing is we're bringing video games back to families and friends, couch co-op, playing in a room together, no matter what your skill level is. Because that was one of the things that the Wii did with Wii Bowling, right? With Wii Sports. That was a beautiful thing. Nursing homes were buying the damn thing, right? And so, but Nintendo or any other company has never really followed up with that. The Wii U certainly was that. That was the exact opposite direction, where it was a single player machine. You wanted a second controller for the Wii U? It was $179, right? You know how many 2-player games there were for the Wii U?
Not many.
How about 0?
Oh.
Yeah. So that's it. And the Switch is a great machine as well. And I don't want to seem like I'm coming across, because I'm a big fan of all these companies. But there's this huge gaping hole in the industry, which is I want games that are simple, I want them affordable, and I want them for family and friends to play together. And that is not happening in the video game industry, and it hasn't since the Wii. And that's the gap. That's the hole. That's our lane that Intellivision is going to stay in. The machine's $179. Every game is $9.99 or less. It's a game system that comes with 2 controllers. It's the first video game system in 30 years to do that. And you can download a free app and connect up to 8 mobile devices right to the machine out of the box. So you want to play 8-player co-op right out of the box, doesn't cost you a dime. And so that's the thing, is that, and the system itself has 5 games built into it as well.
That's incredible. You mentioned, growing up, it was Atari versus Intellivision. I went through very much the same thing, Genesis versus Super Nintendo, and I was a Genesis kid, which meant that I had Earthworm Jim and Groovy, and I have to ask about it because I feel like you came into composing video games at a fascinating time to get into that, because we were moving out of the 8-bit era, and all of a sudden we can do a lot more with sound in video games. What was it like making music for video games in the 90s?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually started in the 8-bit era. My first games that I worked on in audio was the NES and the Game Boy. The first game I ever did was the Prince of Persia, the original one with Jordan Mechner. But yeah, Earthworm Jim was around 1993, 94, and it was amazing. Because before that you only had 4 voices, 4 monophonic voices that you could work with the NES and the Game Boy. It was basically the same sound chip. And one of those voices, one of those 4, was just a white noise channel. It's like, oh, it sounds like a drum or whatever, So you really only had 3 melodic channels. When the Genesis hit the scene, now you had 6, and they were FM synthesis. And I always liked the Genesis better than the Super Nintendo. Had more sports games, which I liked, but I liked the sound chip. Was beefier, it was deeper,
You can recognize Genesis music when you hear it from a mile away. It sounded so unique for its time.
Absolutely. It was like having a big, beefy Yamaha synth. That's what the chip was. It was the same chip as a very popular synth in the 80s called the DX7, very popular synth that a lot of people worked. And that was basically the chip that was in there. And so not only do we have 6 channels of that, but we also had those 4 other channels that the other systems had, which not a lot of people use, but I always did. And then, so we had 10 channels, but then one of those channels could also be used as a sample channel. So that's how you got Sega at the beginning of, Sonic. But people would only use it for that. They would only use it to do Sega or fight or go, win, because memory, it took up a lot to have a sample like that. It was way more than any graphics or programming. The sound took up most of those cartridges back then. And so everyone, so what I had done is I had figured out a way to where I could do a lot of samples, a lot of those things in a small amount of space. It was like a secret that I'd figured out. And so you look at a game like Earthworm Jim or Global Gladiators or Cool Spot or any of those games I did back then for the Genesis, Terminator, and there's a ton of samples in there. And so I had a completely unfair advantage over everyone else because I would use it for everything. I would use it for guitar hits and drum snares and explosion sounds and to really thrash the hell out of that sound chip because we would use priorities. So every time a sample would happen, something important would happen, it would step on one of the other voices. So even though I only had 6 voices, I was writing music for 8 or 10 channels. It's just, and I would prioritize things so that you would hear it, you would hear different things at different times. And then when the sound design came in, even though sample channels and other channels were dropping out, you never really heard it because that big sound effect or that big guitar solo or whatever was masking the fact that, hey, the kick drum isn't even there anymore, but you never even realized it.
All right, so I got to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, we're here for Video Games Live. This is your baby. It came at a time when I feel like the greater music industry would have laughed at the idea of it. And over the last 15 years, you have been proven so right about the potential of video game music. And I just got to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing when I first started Video Games Live. Everybody thought I was completely nuts. They're like, yeah, look, people who go to a symphony don't play video games, and they're old people, and people who play video games, well, they certainly don't go to to a symphony, so you're totally screwed. No one's going to show up to your dumb thing. And I did the first show at the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. Spent millions of dollars. Basically, every dollar I had earned in the video game industry, I put it in that show, and people thought I was nuts. They're like, you're risking everything you've worked your whole career for, and you're throwing it all away. You're lucky if 500 people show up. And 11,000 people showed up, and all of a sudden I wasn't so crazy. And here we are tonight in Detroit, Michigan, with the amazing, wait till you hear this Detroit Symphony. They are unbelievable. One of the best in the country, actually. And I don't say that, you say that every city you go. No, we don't. Detroit Symphony is definitely in the top 5 in the United States. Really, they're that good. And you'll hear it tonight. You'll be like, damn, he was right. But here we are tonight, and this is show number 497 tonight. And that's a couple years ago, we got the Guinness World Record for the so not only is it been a long running show and popular all over the world, but also we own the Guinness World Record for the symphony show that has done more performances than any other symphony show ever, symphony tour ever. 497 shows. So you're all part of the Guinness World Record tonight until we play in 2 days, and then you won't be. But tonight we'll all celebrate together. And so that's been pretty amazing. And really my goal for creating the show was not only did I want to prove to the world how culturally significant and artistic video games have become, but I also wanted to help usher in a whole new generation of young people to appreciate the orchestra, to appreciate the arts and symphonic music. And I think that's one of the incredible things. We've played to over 2.5 million people. We have 6 albums that came out. Every single one of them debuted on the top 10 charts of Billboard. We did a big PBS special in 2010, over 90 million households. I think that was a big turning point for when video game music went from everyone thinking it was like non-gamers thinking it was non-legitimate to it becoming legitimate. PBS is a huge, that's Pavarotti, the Three Tenors, and you name it, Sarah Brightman, whatever, that's like the real deal. And here we are, and they've done over 4,000 PBS concerts since over the last 50 years. We were ranked number 8 of all time. So again, right up there with Elton John and the freaking Paul McCartney, and it's unbelievable to think, how that affected so many people and who don't even play video games. They saw it as something that was beautiful and everything. So, but the amazing thing is you look in the audience tonight, we do a lot of market research, and about 70% of the audience have never seen an orchestra live. This will be the first time they're seeing an orchestra. And think about this for a second. Video games live, the first time ever where millions of young people in the history of music, in the history of the universe, this is the first time where millions of young people are standing in line to see an orchestra. They didn't even do that in the time of Beethoven, right? Beethoven is a bunch of old white people going to the symphony. Well, guess what? 300 years later, the shit hasn't changed that much. It's still a bunch of old white people. But video games live is young people. Even when you go to some of like the Harry Potter and the Star Wars shows or whatever, it's family stuff. But here, it's young people, millennials and younger. That's who you'll see in the audience. But you'll also see the grandparents bringing their grandkids. You'll see the mom bringing the neighborhood friends together. That's a beautiful thing. And they are the ones we get the best letters from. They'll be like, oh my God, I never knew. Like the video game music was this incredible. And the graphics are so amazing. And the storylines and the characters. I get it now. Now I know why my kids are so much into video games. Thank you so much for opening my eyes. And it's that same kind of sensibility that I want to bring into Intellivision as well, right? Whereas, you don't have to be a gamer to enjoy and love video games and play together as a family, So that's the goal.
He's the president and CEO of Intellivision, a composer of video games you love, and a legend in the gaming industry. Tommy Tallarico has been our guest here today on Checkpoint XP. Tommy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and let me know anytime. Come back, and we'll talk about Intellivision when it comes out next year.
Thanks again to Tommy Tallarico for his time, and make sure you go and check out Video Games Live. And actually, let me try that again. Thanks again to Tommy Tallarico for thanks again Thanks again to Tommy Tallarico for his time, and make sure you go check out Video Games Live at their website. Hang on, I got to find out what their website is. Yeah, videogameslive.com.
Yep.
Thanks again to Tommy Tallarico for his time, and make sure you check out Video Games Live if they're coming to your city at videogameslive.com. For full interviews, make sure you check out our own website over at CheckpointXP.com. Still ahead on Checkpoint XP Daily, we've got to talk about the GTA Online Casino that they've just added that has, by the way, already been banned in 50 countries. That conversation is ahead here on Checkpoint XP. But ahead next, could Disney be making a big play into the video game space?
Okay.
That conversation is ahead next on Checkpoint XP Daily.